"You're fired, old man." My son David's voice echoed through the boardroom I'd built with my own hands 40 years ago. "Security will escort you out. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The board members I'd personally selected, men I'd considered friends, wouldn't meet my eyes as two guards approached my chair. But when my lawyer entered the room carrying a briefcase and announced, "Before we proceed, there's something Mr. Mitchell needs to share with everyone," David's confident smirk began to fade. "Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're watching from in the comments." The security guards looked confused as Patricia Williams, my attorney for 30 years, placed her briefcase on the mahogany conference table. The same table where I'd signed my first $1 million contract, where David had taken his first steps as a toddler while I worked late nights, where I'd taught him everything about business starting when he was 12 years old. "Gentlemen," Patricia announced to the room, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never lost a case that mattered. "Mr. David Mitchell may want to review certain legal documents before proceeding with this termination." David's face had gone pale, but his arrogance was still intact. "Patricia, whatever games my father is playing, they won't work. I have controlling interest now. 51% of Mitchell Construction belongs to me." The board voted unanimously for his removal. Patricia smiled the way a chess master smiles before checkmate. "David, you might want to read Section 12 of the original incorporation papers. The ones your father filed in 1983. She slid a thick folder across the table. "Particularly the clause about succession and ownership transfer." I sat back in my chair, no longer resisting the security guards, and watched my son's world begin to crumble. For 6 months, I'd endured his backstabbing, his manipulation of my employees, his systematic campaign to push me out of the company I'd built from nothing. Now it was time for him to learn the most important business lesson of all. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. 18 months ago, David was my pride and joy. 35 years old, Harvard MBA, 10 years of experience running our West Coast division. I'd groomed him since childhood to take over Mitchell Construction, the company I'd started in my garage with a pickup truck and a dream. We built schools, hospitals, shopping centers. Our name was on half the skyline in 3 states. "Dad," David had said during our weekly lunch meeting, "it's time to start talking about succession planning. You're 68. You should be thinking about retirement, about enjoying your golden years." The conversation seemed natural, loving even. A son concerned about his father's health and happiness. I'd been working 14-hour days for 4 decades, missing family dinners, skipping vacations, building something meaningful to pass down to my children. "What did you have in mind?" I'd asked, cutting into my steak at the same restaurant where we'd shared these father-son business talks for 15 years. "A gradual transition. You remain chairman, I become CEO. We worked together for 2 years, then you step back completely. Full retirement, travel with mom, spend time with the grandkids." His eyes had been warm, sincere. "You've earned it, Dad. Let me carry the load for a while." That was my first mistake, trusting the sincerity in his voice. Over the following months, David began implementing his modernization plan. New accounting systems, updated computer networks, revised employee contracts. Everything was presented as necessary upgrades to keep us competitive in a changing market. "Dad, these old systems are holding us back," he'd explain when I questioned the changes. "We need real-time data, automated processes, streamlined operations. Trust me, this is what they teach at Harvard." My second mistake was believing that his expensive education made him smarter than my 40 years of experience. The changes started small. David restructured the management hierarchy, putting himself at the center of all major decisions. He hired new department heads, young MBAs who spoke his language and shared his vision for aggressive expansion. One by one, my longtime employees were reassigned, demoted, or encouraged to take early retirement. "We need fresh blood," David explained when I protested. "These old-timers are stuck in their ways. They can't adapt to modern business practices." Frank Morrison had been my foreman for 22 years. We'd built our first skyscraper together, sweated through contract negotiations, celebrated every major victory. When David announced Frank's retirement, I felt like I was watching my family dissolve. Son, these aren't just employees. They're partners. They've invested their lives in this company. And we'll take care of them appropriately, David assured me. But sentiment can't drive business decisions, Dad. You taught me that. Had I? When had I taught him that loyalty was weakness, that human relationships were obstacles to profit? I searched my memory for conversations that might have been twisted into such. The fourth mistake was not documenting David's increasingly reckless decisions. His modernization plan included aggressive debt financing, speculative land purchases, and contracts with untested subcontractors. When I questioned the risk, David had ready answers about market opportunities and competitive advantages. Dad, you built this company during a different era. Cash flow management, risk assessment, market timing. These concepts have evolved. We can't grow by playing it safe. But I'd lived through 3 recessions, 2 banking crises, and the 2008 financial collapse. I knew the difference between calculated risk and gambling with other people's money. David's plans felt dangerously familiar to strategies I'd seen destroy companies in the past. Son, debt is a tool, not a strategy. When the market shifts, and it always shifts, you need reserves to weather the storm. That's old school thinking, Dad. Modern businesses leverage capital for maximum growth. We can't compete by hoarding cash like it's 1985. The condescension in his voice was subtle but unmistakable. My experience was outdated. My caution was weakness. My success was luck rather than skill. Fifth mistake. Not realizing that David was actively undermining my relationships with our biggest clients. Mitchell Construction had built its reputation on personal relationships, handshake deals, and old-fashioned reliability. Our clients knew they could trust us to deliver quality work on time and within budget. That trust had sustained us through 4 decades of growth. David's approach was different. Aggressive bidding, cost-cutting measures, and what he called strategic relationship management. When longtime clients began expressing concerns about project delays and quality issues, I didn't immediately connect their complaints to David's new methods. Mr. Mitchell, said Janet Harrison, CEO of Harrison Medical Group, during what I thought was a routine check-in call. We've worked together for 15 years, but something's changed. Your project managers seem rushed, your crews are cutting corners, and frankly, we're not getting the attention we used to receive. I promised to investigate personally, but when I tried to visit the Harrison project site, the new site manager told me David had specifically instructed that all client communications go through corporate headquarters. I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell, but those are my orders. If you want to discuss the project, you'll need to schedule a meeting through Mr. David's office. My own employees were treating me like a stranger on my own construction sites. The 6th mistake was the biggest one, not recognizing that David was systematically transferring company assets to accounts under his personal control. It started with the efficiency initiative. David convinced the board that centralized financial management would streamline operations and improve cash flow. All divisional accounts were consolidated under a new corporate structure, with David as the sole signatory for major expenditures. Dad, you'll still have oversight through the monthly reports, he assured me when I questioned the change. But day-to-day financial management needs to be faster, more responsive. We can't wait for multiple approvals every time we need to pay a vendor or transfer funds. The monthly reports looked impressive on paper. Revenue was up, profit margins were strong, expansion projects were ahead of schedule. But when I tried to dig deeper into the numbers, to understand where specific money was going, I hit walls of bureaucracy and technical explanations. These new accounting systems are complex, Dad. The old way of tracking expenses doesn't work with automated processing. Trust me, everything is properly documented and audited. Trust. That word again. The weapon David used to disarm every question, silence every doubt. By month 10 of his succession plan, I was functionally powerless in my own company. Employees wouldn't take my calls without David's approval. Clients were redirected to his office for all communications. Board meetings had become formal ceremonies where David presented his decisions for rubber stamp approval. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life's work. The breaking point came during the quarterly board meeting in March. David presented his plan for complete organizational restructuring, which involved buying out several smaller competitors and expanding into 3 new states simultaneously. "The financing is already arranged," he announced, displaying charts and projections that looked impressive but felt wrong in my gut. "We'll triple our revenue within 18 months and establish Mitchell Construction as the dominant regional player." The numbers didn't add up. The timeline was unrealistic. The debt load would leave us vulnerable to any market downturn. When I tried to voice these concerns, David cut me off with practiced efficiency. "Dad, I understand your hesitation. Change is scary, especially for someone who's been doing things the same way for 40 years. But the business world has evolved. We can't compete using 1980s strategies." The board members nodded along, impressed by David's confidence and credentials. Nobody wanted to side with the old man against the Harvard MBA with all the modern answers. That's when I made my 7th and final mistake. I underestimated my own son's capacity for betrayal. 2 weeks after the board meeting, David scheduled a private lunch to discuss our relationship going forward. I expected another conversation about retirement planning and succession timelines. Instead, I got an ultimatum. "Dad, this isn't working. Having 2 leaders is confusing for employees and frustrating for clients. The board agrees that we need clear, singular authority." David's voice was calm, professional, devoid of emotion. "I'm prepared to buy out your shares at fair market value. You'll get a generous severance package and full retirement benefits." I stared at my son across the table, this man I'd raised from infancy, taught to walk and talk and think and dream. "You want me to sell you my company?" "Our company, Dad. The company we've been building together for the past year. The company that will be much more successful under unified leadership. David, this company is my life's work. It's your inheritance, your legacy. I built it for you, for your children, for our family. And now I'm ready to take full responsibility for that legacy. But I need you to step aside completely. No interference, no second guessing, no undermining my—" The coldness in his voice was shocking. This wasn't a son asking for his father's blessing. This was a corporate raider making a hostile takeover offer. "What if I refuse?" David smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Dad, I control 51% of the company stock now. The board supports my leadership. The employees follow my direction. You can make this easy or difficult, but the outcome is the same." That's when I realized the terrible truth. Every change David had implemented, every modernization and efficiency improvement, had been carefully designed to strip me of power and isolate me from my own creation. The succession plan had been a deception from day one. "How?" I asked, genuinely confused about the mechanics of his betrayal. "The shares you transferred to me over the past 2 years for tax planning purposes," David explained patiently, like he was teaching a slow student. "Plus the shares Mom signed over to me when she updated her will. Plus the employee stock options I've been quietly purchasing at above market rates. Simple math, Dad. The tax planning, the estate planning, the employee incentive programs. All legitimate business strategies that I'd approved, that David had recommended for perfectly logical reasons. Each decision had seemed smart individually, but together they'd transferred control of my company to my son. The employees who sold you their stock options, they know what you're doing? They know I'm offering them immediate value for paper assets they might never be able to liquidate otherwise. Most of them are smart enough to take the money. And the board wants leadership that understands modern business practices. They want someone who can take Mitchell Construction to the next level, not someone who's stuck in the past." David signaled for the check, our lunch meeting apparently over. "I need your answer by Friday, Dad. Accept the buyout offer and retire gracefully, or face the consequences of trying to fight this transition. I drove home in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. My son, my heir, my business partner had just threatened me. The company I'd built from nothing, the legacy I'd planned to pass down through generations, was being stolen from under my nose by my own flesh and blood. That evening, I sat in my home office surrounded by 40 years of memories. Awards from the Chamber of Commerce. Photos with governors and mayors at ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Letters from satisfied clients thanking us for projects completed on time and under budget. The tangible evidence of a life spent building something meaningful. Margaret found me there around midnight, staring at the wall of photographs that chronicled our family's rise from working-class struggle to comfortable success. How did this happen? I asked her, not really expecting an answer. How did I raise a son who could do this to his own father? Margaret sat down beside me, taking my hand in hers. You raised him to be successful, Robert. Maybe too successful. Maybe he learned the wrong lessons about what success means. I thought I was teaching him about hard work, about building something lasting, about taking care of people who depend on you. And maybe he learned about taking what you want, about winning at any cost, about treating people as assets to be managed. Her words hit me like physical blows. Had I created this monster? Had my own ambition and drive somehow twisted into something ugly in my son's mind? Thursday night, I barely slept. Friday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood. David had given me until end of business to accept his buyout offer. I spent the morning walking through my empty house, looking at family photos, remembering better times when David was still my son instead of my enemy. At 2 p.m., I called Patricia Williams, my attorney, and asked her to meet me at her office. If David wanted to play corporate hardball, I needed to understand exactly what weapons I had left. Robert, Patricia said after reviewing my situation, legally, David's position appears strong. If he controls 51% of the voting shares, and the board supports his leadership, there's limited recourse for minority shareholders. So he wins. He steals 40 years of my work, and I just have to accept it. Patricia was quiet for a long moment, studying documents I'd brought from my home office. Tell me about the original incorporation papers from 1983. Do you have copies of everything you filed? I'd kept meticulous records from the beginning, every contract and agreement preserved in fireproof filing cabinets. I have everything. Every document, every amendment, every stock transfer. And the employee stock option program David's been using to acquire shares. When was that established? About 3 years ago. David said it would help with retention, give employees a stake in the company's success. Patricia's eyes lit up as she found what she was looking for. Robert, I need you to look at Section 12 of your original incorporation filing. Read it carefully and tell me what it says about stock transfers and succession planning. I put on my reading glasses and found the relevant section. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. Any transfer of shares exceeding 20% of total company stock requires unanimous approval from all founding members and their designated heirs. And who are the founding members? Me and Margaret. We started the company together, even though she never took an active role in daily operations. Patricia smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. Robert, every stock transfer David has made over the past 2 years is potentially invalid. He needed Margaret's explicit approval for any acquisition that would give him controlling interest. But Margaret signed papers. She transferred her shares to David as part of our estate planning. Did she sign papers specifically approving David's purchase of employee stock options? Did she consent to any transfer that would give him majority control of Mitchell Construction? I thought back through the various documents Margaret had signed, the meetings with financial planners and estate attorneys. Most of the paperwork had dealt with tax implications and inheritance planning. I couldn't remember any specific approvals for David's stock acquisition strategy. I don't think so. The estate planning was about what would happen after we're gone. It wasn't about immediate control transfers. Then David doesn't actually own 51% of Mitchell Construction. His stock purchases are invalid without proper approval from all founding members. For the first time in months, I felt hope stirring in my chest. What does this mean? It means your son has been operating under false assumptions about his legal authority. It means the board has been following someone who doesn't actually have the power to make the decisions he's been making. Can we stop him? Patricia was already reaching for her phone. We can do better than stop him. We can expose him. Every contract he's signed, every financial decision he's made, every employee he's terminated, all of it done without proper authority. Saturday morning, Patricia and I met with Margaret to review every document she'd signed over the past 3 years. As we suspected, none of them had given David permission to purchase additional stock or assume majority control of the company. I signed papers about inheritance and taxes, Margaret confirmed. Nobody ever asked me about David buying stock from employees or taking control while you were still alive. Patricia prepared an emergency filing for Monday morning, documents that would freeze all of David's recent corporate actions, pending a full legal review. But she also had a better idea. Robert, instead of just stopping David, we should let him expose himself completely. Let him fire you in front of the board. Let him make his illegal authority clear to everyone. Then we'll reveal the truth about his stock acquisitions and board authority. You want me to walk into that boardroom knowing I'm about to be humiliated? I want you to walk into that boardroom knowing you're about to watch David destroy his own career through his arrogance and illegal actions. Monday morning arrived like Judgment Day. I drove to Mitchell Construction one last time, looking at the building I'd designed and built, the parking lot where I'd celebrated groundbreakings and grand openings, the sign bearing my name that David would probably change within a week. The boardroom was full when I arrived. David sat at the head of the table in my usual chair, looking confident and presidential. The 12 board members I'd personally selected over the years avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable with what they were about to witness. "Gentlemen," David began, "we're here today to formalize the leadership transition we've been discussing. My father has served Mitchell Construction admirably for 40 years, but the time has come for new leadership and fresh vision." Tom Bradley shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "David, maybe we should discuss this privately first. Your father deserves better than a public termination." "Actually," David replied coldly, "my father deserves exactly what his performance merits. His resistance to necessary changes has become a liability to this company. His outdated methods are holding us back from our full potential. I listened to my son systematically destroy my reputation in front of men who'd known me for decades. Every decision I'd made, every success I'd achieved, was reframed as luck or stubbornness. Every concern I'd raised about his aggressive expansion was portrayed as fear and weakness. The fact is, gentlemen, that Mitchell Construction needs leadership that understands modern business practices. We need someone who can make hard decisions without being paralyzed by sentiment and tradition." That's when David made his fatal mistake. He pulled out prepared termination papers and placed them on the table in front of me. "Dad, I'm offering you a generous severance package and full retirement benefits. All you have to do is sign these papers acknowledging that you're stepping down voluntarily." The board members watched in horrified fascination as David humiliated his own father. Even the ones who supported his leadership looked uncomfortable with the public nature of my destruction. I looked at the termination papers, then at David's confident smile, then at the men who'd trusted my leadership for decades. "And if I refuse to sign? Then security will escort you from the building, and you'll receive the minimum severance required by law." That's when Patricia entered the room. "Before anyone signs anything," she announced, placing her briefcase on the table, "there are some legal issues that need to be addressed." David's confidence wavered slightly. "Patricia, this is a private board meeting. Whatever business you have with my father can wait." "Actually, David, my business concerns this entire board. It concerns the validity of every decision you've made over the past 6 months, and the legal authority you've been claiming to possess." She opened her briefcase and removed a thick folder of documents. Gentlemen, I need to inform you that David Mitchell has been operating without proper legal authority to make binding corporate decisions. The room went completely silent. David's face had gone pale, but he tried to maintain his composure. That's ridiculous. I own 51% of this company. The stock transfers are all properly documented. Patricia smiled the way a prosecutor smiles when presenting smoking gun evidence. David, you own exactly the same percentage you owned 2 years ago. Every additional share you've purchased is invalid under the original incorporation agreement. She slid copies of the 1983 incorporation papers across the table to each board member. Section 12 clearly states that any stock transfer exceeding 20% requires unanimous approval from all founding members. Margaret Mitchell never approved your acquisition strategy. The board members studied the documents with growing alarm. Tom Bradley looked up with shock written across his face. David, is this true? You've been making corporate decisions without proper stock ownership. David's arrogance was crumbling in real time. There must be some mistake. My attorneys reviewed every transaction. The estate planning documents clearly transferred authority. The estate planning documents transferred inheritance rights, Patricia interrupted. They had nothing to do with immediate stock ownership or corporate control. Every share you've purchased from employees, every decision you've made based on claimed majority ownership, every contract you've signed as controlling shareholder, all of it is legally invalid. The implications hit the board members like a series of explosions. 6 months of corporate decisions, millions of dollars in contracts, major policy changes, all potentially invalid because David had been operating without proper authority. What does this mean for the company? Asked Jim Foster, our chief financial officer. It means every major decision made over the past 6 months needs to be reviewed and potentially reversed. It means contracts signed by someone without proper authority may not be binding. It means Mitchell Construction could face significant legal exposure. David tried one last desperate play. Even if there are technical issues with the stock transfers, the board has clearly endorsed my leadership. That should provide sufficient authority for corporate decisions. Patricia was ready for that argument too. The board endorsed your leadership based on your claimed majority ownership. They believed you had controlling interest when they voted to support your policies. That support was obtained through fraud. The word fraud hung in the air like smoke from a gun. David's career wasn't just ending. It was being destroyed before everyone's eyes. Tom Bradley stood up slowly, his face grim. David, I think you need to leave this room immediately. The board needs to discuss this situation without you present. You can't remove me from my own board meeting. It's not your board meeting, I said quietly, speaking for the first time since Patricia had arrived. It's never been your board meeting. It's my company, my board, my meeting. You're just an employee who's been pretending to have authority you never possessed. David looked around the room desperately, seeking support from board members who were now avoiding his eyes entirely. The men who'd followed his leadership for months were realizing they'd been manipulated by someone with no legitimate authority. Dad, we can work this out. We can fix the legal issues and continue working together. No, son. We can't. You tried to steal my company. You humiliated me in front of my friends. You treated me like a senile old man who'd outlived his usefulness. Security guards entered the room. The same guards David had called to escort me out. Tom Bradley spoke to them quietly, then returned to the table. David, you're suspended from all corporate duties pending a full investigation. Security will escort you from the building. You're not to return or attempt to conduct any business on behalf of Mitchell Construction until this matter is resolved. The irony was perfect. David was being removed from the boardroom by the same security team he'd summoned to humiliate me. As the guards approached his chair, David made one final, desperate appeal. Dad, please. I'm your son. We're family. Don't destroy me over a business disagreement. I looked at this man I'd raised from infancy, this person I'd loved and trusted and betrayed by. David, you destroyed yourself. I just refuse to let you destroy my company too. The boardroom door closed behind David with a soft click that sounded like justice. Over the following weeks, the full scope of David's betrayal became clear. The aggressive expansion plans were funded with illegal debt agreements. The new construction contracts contained clauses that would have bankrupted us within 2 years. The employee terminations he'd orchestrated were designed to eliminate anyone who might question his authority. Worst of all, he'd been secretly negotiating to sell Mitchell Construction to a corporate competitor, planning to cash out his illegally obtained shares and leave the company's employees and legacy in ruins. Patricia's investigation revealed that David had learned more than business strategy during our father-son talks over the years. He'd learned my negotiation techniques, my client management philosophy, my financial planning methods, and he'd used every bit of that knowledge to systematically betray me. The board unanimously requested that I resume full control of Mitchell Construction. The employees who'd been terminated were offered their jobs back with full back pay and benefits. The clients who'd been alienated by David's methods were personally contacted and assured that the company's values and standards would be restored. But the hardest part wasn't rebuilding the business relationships David had damaged. The hardest part was accepting that I'd lost my son forever. Margaret tried to convince me to forgive him, to find some way to repair our relationship. He's still your child, Robert. Still our boy. Family should mean more than business. Margaret, what David did wasn't about business. It was about character. It was about betraying someone who loved and trusted him. That's not something you forgive and forget. 3 months later, David moved to Phoenix and started his own construction company with money he'd secretly siphoned from Mitchell Construction during his illegal tenure as CEO. He never apologized, never acknowledged the damage he'd caused, never expressed regret for betraying his own father. Sometimes I wonder if I failed as a parent, if I somehow taught him that success justified any method, that family loyalty was weakness in the business world. Other times I think David made his own choices, chose greed over gratitude, ambition over honor. 1 year later, Mitchell Construction is stronger than ever. We've completed 3 major projects ahead of schedule and under budget. Our reputation has been restored, our employees are loyal and motivated, our clients trust us again. But I'm still haunted by the question every betrayed father asks himself. How do you raise a son who becomes your enemy? The answer, I've learned, is that sometimes you don't. Sometimes you raise someone who looks like your son, but has the heart of a stranger. Someone who can sit across from you at lunch and plot your destruction while smiling at your stories. David taught me the most painful business lesson of my career. Trust must be earned, even from family. Especially from family. To all the fathers and grandfathers watching this story, protect what you've built, but more importantly, pay attention to who you're building it for. Blood relationships don't guarantee loyalty, and love doesn't always prevent betrayal. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones most capable of destroying you, because they know exactly where to aim.